So let's just go over the basics of RPG Maker. Not really going into depth about this project, just kind of the buttons and what some of the icons are. So this is the main thing you're going to want to focus on. So obviously we have the project loaded up. You can go to open and open game.rpg project. That'll pull up the game. You want to make sure this icon is clicked first and foremost. This is your event icon. This is how you will be able to actually edit events. So these little gray boxes here, these are your events. This is what you can mess around with and make it do different things, play cinematics, move a certain way, whatever it's going to do. For instance, this one's going to show a picture, wait a little bit, fade the screen out. We'll go into that later. This is your map editing icon. We're never going to touch this. The way maps are handled is strictly through the plugins, so never change off of this. We will never use this map icon. It'll always be in event mode. Over here are your settings. We shouldn't need this too much. This is where we would add the different characters. So Cissnae's been added. The face picture doesn't matter. The way pictures are used, I actually just pull the image instead of using the face, just because of from what I can tell, we can't flip faces left and right, so the easiest way is just to pull the image for now. I could look into flipping faces, maybe that would ultimately be easier, but either way, this is where you would set which sprite that character is using. So, for instance, we wouldn't set an Avalanche character. This is all just playable characters. This is who you can bring into battle and that kind of thing. But this is what you would do. You would have your character name, Avalanche, for example, double click, and this will allow you to open who you want. Who do you want to fight as? These are all the different default people you can be, but these are the sprite sheets Davina's created. So if we wanted Avalanche, we pick Avalanche, okay, and now they're there. Double click in the battler and say we want it to be that guy. We can make it that guy. That's where you would set that if we do implement people later. In the system tab, these are a couple of different things. You do want to make sure start transparent is checked. This allows, as the player is being transferred from one map to the other, this keeps them transparent, so we don't have to worry about setting their transparency each time. All we have to worry about is when to turn it on. So this way you don't have to turn something off, turn it on, turn it off, turn it on. This just they're always invisible until you say stop being invisible. The title screen is just the logo that was created. We can look into a scrolling logo. I think there was something on Mog Hunter had a plugin that might make it look correct. But I would imagine it's still probably going to be set from here. And then a boat, ship, airship, I don't think we'll ever use any of this information. However, there are the title screen themes, the battle theme, the game over, music. So that's where we would set some of that, the different sounds. So I've actually pulled this from the Final Fantasy VII PC game. So whenever the cursor moves, it makes the Final Fantasy noise. When you hit OK, it makes the game load noise. This is where we would set all of those. So that's going to be settings. We probably will not need to touch any of that. These are where all the plugins are. What you need to know about the plugins is their order does matter. So you can see here, you can set them off or on. The ones that are off they're things we probably won't need, but there's a chance that we may want it later, so they're just turned off for now. So a good example of the order mattering is the Yanfly engine plugin, YEP. This is the main engine, so anything below this is referencing up here. So his message core, this extra message pack, whatever this is, they're all referencing this. So if I move this up here, it's not going to work correctly anymore because it doesn't know what to reference. So the order of these matters, the order of these Q plugins matter, and ultimately all of them matter. So if we move the Q plugins above this one, it may not work correctly. So probably don't mess with this too much. I can't imagine we'll need too many more plugins outside of what we're doing for the battle and maybe for the title screen. The rest, this should be pretty set. I don't think there's much left to really add. We'll go over these really quickly. This is just some basic editing like window size, but nothing we'll really touch. This may be something we change later, the NBS map zoom. This tells how close to zoom in on the map. So if you remember, we had some issues with the alley where this part of the map was flowing over here and vice versa, and it just didn't look good at all. That plugin tells it how far to zoom in. So instead of seeing this entire thing, it just has a display right here until you move. And it also helps if it's zoomed out too far, the game fills in that information because it's actually set. The screen size is set 816 by 624. So the width of this does not fill up 816, which it obviously does not, then the game needs to put information and it just pulls from the sides. So by zooming in, the game is able to stop it right where the actual background map ends. So that's where that will be set. All of these may be something like this is the battle backgrounds, how much gold you have. It may set your max level. This is where we can tweak the battle a little bit unless we completely change plugins. There's just some extra things we can do, and that's just the core Fly Engine plugin. Here's the map plugin, or not the map, the message plugin. So this is saying, okay, for the message box, make it be 3 rows, make it a width of 520 pixels, which we may need to change now that I've changed the zoom to 1.8 instead of 1.6. But this is where a lot of that's set. Don't wrap, or do wrap the words if it overflows, or maybe that's that one. I don't know. Some of these you'll have to read. This box over here, this actually explains how to do different features. So you'll notice there's different parts where the font gets bigger. This is the command you would use to increase the text size. Font size change, this says change it by 4. So if it's by default 10, it'll go to 14. And this is the max it can be is 96. The smallest it can be is 12. So that's how we adjust a lot of that. And this is where the name boxes are set. So this tells it on the X coordinate to be at this point, on the Y coordinate to be at this point, what padding color it is, what name box color, and the color is actually going to be set in here. So in image system window.png. So if we count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's using this color because that's number 10. So that's the font color it'll make the name boxes. This makes the box clear, so we could. This is just different ways you can customize that name box if we wanted to. This is also where we set the font for the messages. So if you remember, we had that discussion about changing it to Optima. So this is the Optima font being used. It also has to be included within the files right here in fonts. So there's Optima. That way we can distribute it with the game. Because otherwise, if it's not in here, I don't believe it'll work unless it's installed on the system. And even then, if it's not installed on the system, I'm not sure. It may just strictly reference this folder and use the default if it's not there. So if we do change the font in the future, that is where we would change it at. Let's see, what else do we have? I don't remember what this is. This can set different sounds that the font makes, like you can have like a typing noise and things like that. I don't think I use this, but it's possible. This may be one of the things I just downloaded and thought we would need and actually don't. Q plus is the movement. It's kind of how the backgrounds and how the sprites work. So again, just like this being the main plugin for these two, this is the main plugin for these. Everything under Q, this is the default, the thing it's referencing. Quick test, we actually want to turn to true. That allows us to bypass the new game and continue screen. So going forward, this will probably be on true, so we don't have to worry about the title screen when play testing. Q movement sets, this is kind of the, I suppose, the collision value. So it says if the player character's collision box gets within 4 pixels of the grid we make, which is this red. So this is the default map. The red overlay, or the pink overlay, is where the player can't go. So once we get within 4 pixels of this wall, it'll stop. So that should just be default. I don't think we'll need to change that, but that's what that is. Tile size is 48. That's just the size of these tiles. There's nothing we can really do about that. It's just the way RPG Maker MV is. Or I suppose we could change it, but we don't need to. It's good like it is. This allows diagonal movement. It's not saying diagonal sprites. The diagonal sprites are actually going to be used with QSprite. We'll go into QSprite a little bit later. It's not terribly confusing once you learn it, but this is where that information is. So if you've noticed, the Cisne image file with the sprite sheet is %hero-Cisne. This is actually set within the QSprite program, what this config is. We'll go into that later. The idle interval, this is just different ways to make them act, so they can, sometimes you can make them move when they idle, so if you're just standing there, they'll move instead of just holding still. So the collision map is actually set within each map. So every one of these has its own map. If you go into edit, you can hit space. Right here, this is the information you would enter to say, hey, use this collision map. So here's where you would pick which background it's using. So for this Sector 8 map, we want to use this Sector 8 map. Say OK. We want to use collision map, ! 1 Sector 8 CM. This doesn't need to be the same. Obviously, it's easier to keep track of it if it is. The 1 is just let me know which chapter. And then Sector 8, that's just describing this area. CM is just letting me know this is the collision map file. But all the red is where you can't run, the clear is where you can. So if we turn that on, everything white we can move to and move around wherever we want. Okay, so that's the collision map. The animated bus is what is allowing the blinking that Davina was heading up a little bit. Probably, I think we've got it set how we want it, so we don't really need to worry too much about like all the different things it can and can't do and how to make it loop here and there. I think we've got a pretty good system going. So that's just kind of the basics on how to make RPG Maker run. This will play the game, allow you to start playing. I'm not going to save the changes because I don't know what I changed, but this is how we would then get into it. Well, I suppose we'll go over one more part. You can also set where your player starts. So if you click a tile, right-click, set starting position player, it'll play from here. So this is actually the very first screen. If we look in this event here, you can see that it wants to play the Chapter 1 picture. If we go to the Chapter 1 picture in the images folder, we want to look in pictures, chapter1.png. So this is the very first thing you see in the game once you hit new game. It plays Chapter 1, Those Who Lurk in the Night. It displays that for 180 frames, which is going to be about 3 seconds. It fades the screen out, it erases that picture, and then we transfer the player to Sector 8. So Sector 8's in here, it transfers the player, and that's when this guy runs left, this guy runs left, the whole screen kind of moves down, moves up to the sewer, it fades out, and then we go here, and all that movement happens. So we'll cover that in the next tutorial. Hope this is helpful, guys.